master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Hey, welcome to Half the Metal, and welcome, my friends, to main character May.
Well, we've looked at the Cobra, Serpentor, and we've looked at the Joe, Duke.
So this time, let's look at a character that's technically neither.
Yes, all of May will be looking at Zartan, the Master of Disguise and leader of the Dreadnoks.
And today, we'll be looking at the action figures.
So to start, meet Zartan version 1. This figure was released in 1984 with all original body parts.
Some really original body parts, but we'll get to that later.
Also, full disclosure, I'm technically showing you this figure with some accessories. Normally, I start by just showing the figure, but that just didn't feel right in this case.
You'll see why soon.
1984 introduced a lot of iconic bad guys in the G.I.Joe line. You had the Baroness, Firefly, freaking Storm Shadow, Scrap Iron, and of course, Zartan. And out of all the 1984 figures, Zartan sure as hell looks the most unique.
In fact, there are so many unique things, I don't know where to start.
I suppose it's best to go from top to bottom. So first, there's his, hair? Okay, for this, I do have to break my rule about talking about the toys first and other media later, because this thing has confused fans for years.
What the hell does he have on his head?
Well, looking at the toy at first glance, you'd be forgiven to think this is a guy with long hair. But if you look at the only other character from 84 with a similar design for hair, the Baroness, you can tell it isn't. Yeah, with the Baroness you can see hair strands molded into her hair sculpt, while Zartan just has folds. So, in this case, it's a cowl. In the box art, well, it's a bit more ambiguous, but it still looks like a cowl there. And in the comic books, it's definitely a cowl, since he takes the bloody thing off on several occasions.
So where does the confusion come from?
The cartoon series, of course, where it's often depicted as just being his hair, but it is a cowl. So, let's move on, because so far we've only discussed the top of his freaking head. Right below the top is the face. And it's another unique one. He's got sorta diamond-shaped black around the eyes. Kinda reminds me of the Ultimate Warrior. Also, his eyes are freaky. They are completely yellow and look like unnatural holes beaming out at you. It's weird, otherworldly, and cool.
Honestly, the eyes are probably my favorite feature of the figure.
Moving down more, he's got a chest piece that A, wouldn't look out of place at an S&M club, and B, is removable. Yeah, this is one of the things I meant when I said I'm showing the figure with some accessories, as the chest piece is one. Well, the front anyway. The back one is part of the torso mold. But the figure just doesn't look right without it on.
There's a reason why it's removable, and we'll get to that soon.
It's got transparent plastic in the middle, for, again, reasons we'll get to, and it's really amazing how well the thing stays on since there's no pegs that slot in. Really, it's just form-fitting. Going further down, he's got some more accessories.
Well, accessories, really.
There's 2 pads on his upper legs. YoJoe.com calls them knee pads, but they aren't on his knees, so thigh pads? Anyway, they are removable too, and also have a transparent middle.
Back to the figure itself, it's got some good detailing.
There's the eyes, of course, and the black surrounding them, and his upper arms have a unique pattern. There's also nice little stuff like painted belt loops and heavy boots with a knife molded on one of them. When you remove the breastplate, though, there's one thing missing.
Well, technically 2 things.
He doesn't have nipples! This man is nipple-free. This seems like a strange thing to omit, but the last thing I want to do is keep focusing on Zartan's nipples, or lack thereof, so let's move on.
You see, there's one thing that makes this figure even more unique. It has a gimmick.
If you put this figure out in the sun, his skin will change color to blue. Well, bluish. At the time, anyway. Considering this toy is like 36 years old, the chemical process that allows this has lost much of its power, so the best I could get was a bluish sheen on it. It barely shows up in the photos, but it was there. This is also why he has a boob window, for lack of a better term, in his breastplate. It's so you could have patterns on his skin. There's another reason for the boob window, and for the transparent thigh pads. You see, originally, this figure came with color-changing stickers that were also affected by the sun. Though I don't have them, and I assume they are quite rare and sought after now.
Let me just check and...
Holy crap, $100 for a set?
Yeah, not getting those for this review.
Anyway, now we come to his accessories. Well, a few more of his accessories, I mean. He came with a small laser pistol that looks quite nice and unique. He also had a backpack, one that actually opened up. And inside, there's a human face. Yeah, remember, Zartan is supposed to be a master of disguise, so this is a face mask. Well, let's see the master of disguise in action. Okay, gotta admit, I'm a bit underwhelmed. Yeah, this never worked for me even as a kid. He might have a mask on, Mission Impossible style, but the rest of him still looks like Zartan.
That wouldn't fool a toddler!
Also, apropos of nothing, the face always reminded me of Alex Sector from Mask, which just made it weirder. As a kid, it was better to just have another figure pretend to be Zartan in disguise, because he always had a full disguise in the comics and cartoons. The backpack that reveals the face is very cool though. Anyway, overall, it's a really cool and unique looking figure. A definite must for every collection.
And that's very unfortunate.
Because a mint complete Zartan is a pain in the ass to find. There's his regular accessories, meaning the very small gun, backpack and mask that could be missing.
That would suck, but the figure would still look fine.
But then there's the breast and thigh plates. Losing those just makes the figure look wrong. I've also seen Zartans that have had the cowl ripped off, so even that can be missing. And that's not even getting into the fact he came with a whole freaking vehicle that could have parts missing or just not be there at all. By the way, we won't be looking at the Chameleon as I don't have it, and it's more suitable for small vehicle reviews we do in the summertime.
All these different things that come with the figure that can get lost. Oh, I just remembered.
There's the freaking stickers too. Yeah, all that makes Zartan a very tough and expensive figure to get complete in your collection.
And we're not done because there's another major problem with finding a mint condition Zartan. It has to do with his body construction.
For some reason, to accommodate the chemical color changing gimmick, they welded the two halves of his torso together. So even if you took the screw out, the torso wouldn't separate. That means there's no way to replace the O-ring inside the figure if it should break or wear out without damaging the figure itself. So if you do find a Zartan figure, it's gonna have a 36-year-old O-ring in it. So what you really don't want to do is move it too much and put extra strain on it.
'Cause once it goes, it's gone.
So yeah, in conclusion, this is a great figure and a nightmare to find mint and complete.
Zartan did get another figure in the original line, and I can't wait to see what cool new look and gimmicks they came up with. What the fuck?
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
He's a musical master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Introducing Zartan. Zartan changes color in sunlight.
There's Zartan! He's escaping in the chameleon! Let's go get him! Joe!
But Zartan has a disguise.
Where's Zartan? I don't know any Zartan.
Zartan changes color in sunlight, and Zartan comes with the chameleon. Other figures and equipment each sold separately from Hasbro. Now, back to G.I. Joe.
Okay, I'm feeling better now. Meet Zartan version 2. This figure was released in 1993 with all original body parts.
And yeah, this sure is a thing, isn't it?
I don't think you could get further away from the original design unless you made him an alien or something. At first glance, he looks like a punk biker. At second glance, he looks like what somebody who's never seen a punk biker thinks a punk biker looks like.
Once again, I don't know where to begin.
Let's just start with the head again, shall we? Well, he's got a mohawk, a neon orange mohawk.
Duh.
It's a separate piece of flexible plastic, not part of the head mold, but it is glued in. Still, that does mean that, like with version 1, there's a chance you'll find the top of his head missing if you look for the figure second hand. So at least they have that in common. The second thing they have in common is the face paint, also in orange, but it does stay true to the original in design.
Okay, at this point I may have to walk back what I said earlier. You know, that they couldn't get further away from the original design?
Because the third thing they have in common is the unnatural eyes, though in this case they are white, making me think he's the Avatar or something. Moving on, the leather vest is mostly fine, though I would like to have seen more detail and a different color for the orange chain. Also, I'm not convinced a sleeveless biker vest is the best safety-wise, but it's not like the Dreadnoks have ever been known for responsible biker gear. Then there's the pants.
Oh god, the pants!
Why are they neon green? Why in the name of Cthulhu's nutsack are they neon green? At least the purple on the boots and knife sheaths looks nice, but it's completely overshadowed by the screaming green surrounding it. Yeah, this is not a good color scheme. But honestly, even with better colors, it still wouldn't be a great figure.
Also, this figure is supposed to have a gimmick.
The torso winds up and swings back. Except it doesn't on mine because the mechanism has worn out due to age and use. To accommodate the mechanism, this figure's body construction is different, so it doesn't have an O-ring or a hole in the back.
And why does he have a gimmick? 'Cause he's supposed to be a ninja!
Oh yeah, Zartan, the Master of Disguise, is now also a ninja. This figure was released under the Ninja Force subteam, though as a bad guy, obviously.
I'll get more into that next time when we talk about the character.
This also meant he came with a bunch of ninja weapons on a tree, in bright orange of course, because this toy hates me personally, so I'm not even gonna talk about them. Well, not right now, anyway. Overall, yeah, I don't like this figure very much.
Obviously.
And those were the only two figures Zartan got in the original line, with the first being the best.
I think I used that snake clip too soon.
This doesn't mean we're done though, as Zartan did get a bunch more figures by Hasbro in later years, so we'll take a look at some of those.
But before we do, we're gonna take a little detour.
All the way from the USA to India, because they also made a Zartan figure there. So meet Fun School Zartan. This figure was released in 2001 with no original body parts. And I have to... Holy crap, that's terrifying! Look at that face! That's not G.I.Joe, that's Night of the Living Dead! Yeah, it's amazing what just a little change in paint applications can do, right?
I'm gonna be seeing that thing in my nightmares!
Anyway, the figure has the same parts as the US version, but it doesn't change color, and the transparent plastic on the chest guard and thigh pads are black. They also come off way more easily than on the US one, especially the thigh pads. What more can I say? If the original looks a bit freaky, this version is the mayor of Freaksville, Florida. Now, I did say this figure was made in 2001.
And that's probably the reason why the first new Zartan figure from Hasbro looks the way it does.
Meet Zartan version 3. This figure was released in 2001 with no original body parts. He was part of the Real American Hero collection line and was packaged with Shadow Viper. Yeah, that's a whole different can of worms I'm not going into now. I think I talked about it during my Astro Viper review. The figure has Zartan's head and Saw Viper's body, and that's probably because this figure was in production at the same time as the Fun School one, and they didn't get the molds parts back from India in time. Well, except for the head.
Imagine Hasbro asking for a whole body and they just send the head back. That's half a horror movie right there.
Anyway, the Saw Viper body is, not ideal. The chest very vaguely resembles the original, I suppose, but making the top flesh-colored was a mistake, because you can clearly see the collar that's now made of human flesh. By the way, G.I.Joe says this is the original head, but it's ball-jointed now, while the first one just swiveled left and right, and the face looks a bit bigger, so it wouldn't surprise me if this was a new mold based on the original. Overall, the figure isn't great, but I can see what they were going for. A sort of homage to the original.
Up next, we head into the G.I.Joe vs. Cobra line.
So meet Zartan version 4. This figure was released in 2002 with all original body parts. He came in a 2-pack with Scarlet. And it's a different but still familiar take on the character. And the first thing that I noticed was the plunging neckline. It's so freaking plunging that anymore and they'd have to censor the figure. Also, damn, dude has gotten buff. Not counting Punk Zartan, this is the first time they've tried a new color scheme for the character, red and black, plus some metallic sheen and gray. It's okay, I suppose. One interesting thing is that this figure has extra articulation at the wrists, so this is the first Zartan figure that could properly steer a motorcycle.
If he had one.
Another interesting thing is that the cowl is removable. Removing it makes him look like he's a member of the Legion of Doom though. It being removable also means there's a chance it's missing if you try to find a second-hand figure.
Yeah, Zartan is turning into the grand champion of incomplete toys.
One thing I dislike is the Cobra logo on his leg. I mean, he's always been a mercenary, not a proper member of Cobra. Also, I'm not wild about the red color. Overall, it's just an okay figure. This toy was recolored the very same year, and Zartan version 5 came with a Stalker figure. And it's a definite improvement over version 4. The color scheme, dark red, green and black, conjures up thoughts of a swamp, his natural habitat. And he's put on a damn shirt to cover up the plunging neckline. Also, he still has a stripe on his leg, but the Cobra symbol is gone.
As it should be.
They did make another version in the Spy Troops line that used his original color scheme more, but I don't have that one. From looking on eBay, I can say good colors, but the neckline is back, so that's a drawback. He did come with extra heads to disguise himself as Duke or Flint, so that's nice.
There's one unfortunate thing the last 3 toys have in common.
They all have regular eyes.
That's practically sacrilege.
Having freaky eyes was part of his thing. Even Fun School realized that, though I wish they hadn't. But this was disappointing on the new figures.
Moving on, there's just 2 more figures that I own that I can talk about, and they have the modern body construction.
First, there was the 2009 Rise of Cobra movie figure. He's dressed as a generic G.I.Joe trooper since he's in disguise like in the movie. They did a good job capturing the likeness of Arnold Vosloo, the actor playing him who's probably most famous for playing the mummy in the Good Mummy movie from 1999. This figure can also double as an army builder since he came with a different head to complete the disguise as a green shirt. Well, in the movie's case, a blue shirt. The Zartan head has a faint grey version of the eye paint, which is a nice touch, but hardly necessary.
Lastly, we'll look at the 2015 50th anniversary figure.
Because I want to give you an example of the modern style figure take on the original character. This toy came in a set with Hit and Run and Torpedo. And yeah, they did alright. The essence of the character certainly is there. Like some of the modern figures though, it can be a pain in the ass to keep the thing standing up, so a figure stand is recommended. The most important thing though, the freaky eyes are back.
Yes!
I don't really have anything more to say about this figure. It's adequate. And those were the toys.
Well, the ones I have anyway.
There are some modern ones I lack and some convention or club exclusives, like a fully transparent one, but I can only really talk about what I can have in front of me. Out of all of them, they never really topped the first and best, the good old 1984 one. And while I may grumble about how difficult it is to get a mint complete one, with all the bits that can be missing, or a figure so often showing wear and tear, we have to remember that this was never intended to be a product displayed on a shelf almost 40 years later. This was a toy for kids, and it had a metric ton of play value packed in, so kudos to Hasbro for making a great toy.
And that wraps it up. Next time we'll be taking a look at the character, starting with the file cards. Oh boy.
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Introducing Zartan. Zartan changes color in sunlight.
There's Zartan! He's escaping in the chameleon! Let's go get him! Joe!
My neighbors are gonna love that one.
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Hey, welcome to Half the Battle, and welcome back to Main Character May.
And naturally, we're continuing our look at Zartan.
And today, we're gonna take a look at the character, starting with the file cards. And yeah, there's gonna be quite a bit to unpack here.
Okay, let's just get into the controversy straight away and get it over with. Yes, there are 2 different versions of Zartan V1's file card. The difference is that the first version has 2 paragraphs, while the second version has the second paragraph removed.
I'm just gonna warn you all in advance, this is gonna be one hell of a digression, and it's gonna be long.
And why is that? Well, let me just read the second paragraph in full. Psychological profile. Extreme paranoid schizophrenic. Grows into various multiple personalities to such an extent that the original personality becomes buried and forgotten.
Everything in that paragraph is wrong and harmful.
Okay, I'm not an expert on mental health in general, or schizophrenia, known in academic circles as psychosis specifically, so I reached out for help. I asked the Omega, who's a psychology researcher specializing in schizophrenia, for help, and he graciously agreed to answer my questions and sent me research material. I'm also having him vet what I'm saying here, because this is one subject I don't want to screw up.
So, let's discuss why everything here is wrong and harmful.
First of all, the card confuses schizophrenia with what was known at the time as multiple personality disorder, nowadays known as dissociative identity disorder.
And no, people who suffer from schizophrenia don't turn into another personality. Like, at all.
It was a common misconception at the time to conflate the two conditions, and unfortunately still is to this day. So what is schizophrenia or psychosis?
Well, the most common form of schizophrenia manifests itself basically as this.
I hear voices in my head, they counsel me.
But that obviously requires clarification.
It's hallucinations, which unfortunately leads to a couple more misconceptions personified in this clip from The Simpsons.
You've done grand, laddie. Now you know what you have to do. Burn the house down. Burn them all!
Now, first of all, a lot of patients don't actually see things that aren't there. They do, however, hallucinate sounds. And yes, that can include voices, even voices that tell them to do things.
But here's the thing. The vast, I cannot stress this enough, vast majority of schizophrenics are not violent.
For example, say there's a guy who hallucinates two voices in his head. One is his deceased uncle, who wants to save the world, and one is of Bakula, an evil entity bent on destroying it. His uncle tells him to go buy a sandwich right now, or the world will explode, and so he does. That's it. The voice tells him to buy a sandwich.
Yeah, lock that violent maniac up, am I right?
Oh, and if you think I just made up some bullcrap to be funny, that scenario was described by an actual patient that was interviewed for a magazine article about the condition. The evil entity was named Bakula because he once saw an episode of Quantum Leap, and the name of the main actor stuck with him. By the way, it does seem silly and funny, thinking you have to buy a sandwich or the world ends. I mean, how could they believe that, right?
But we all experience something similar all the time, namely when we dream.
We've all had dreams where we can fly, or are suddenly back in high school for one final test or something, and in the dream we don't question it. Being able to fly suddenly seems perfectly reasonable. And as I understand it, it's like that for schizophrenics. One patient I read about literally compared it to that. It all made sense in the dream. It even has a name when absurd things make sense to your brain. Aberrant salience.
I know this because I'm smart. And because the Omega told me.
Well, I hope this gives you some understanding of the condition, because those patients have enough to deal with without the general public misunderstanding. So, let's swing back to the file card paragraph. Not only did it confuse two different mental illnesses, but, like the Simpsons clip, it also assumed schizophrenics are violent, since Zartan is, a bad guy working for a terrorist organization. And naturally, this caused a few eyebrows to be raised, specifically by mental health professionals, who asked Hasbro to kindly cut that crap out.
And they did! Sort of.
Yeah, the Mental Health Association of Indiana asked them to recall the product. But since that sort of thing would cost, money, and Hasbro being Hasbro, they instead made a change mid-production to remove the paragraph on future toys, leaving the first one on the store shelves for a time.
Hasbro, always doing the right thing, as long as it doesn't cost too much.
To finish this whole derail, and for some foreign file card fun, the European cards didn't have the paragraph, as the toys came out later than in the US.
With that, let's finally get into the actual character, starting with the revised file cards.
He's called a Master of Disguise, and as such has aliases too numerous to list. Also, his real name is unknown, Though I kinda always assumed Zartan was his real name. I mean, if you can have a guy whose actual name is Destro, then I don't see the problem here. So we've got an unknown name, unknown birthplace, and too many fake names to keep track of.
Military intelligence at its finest, everybody.
Well, now we come to the meat of the card, and there's quite a lot here. First off, it says Zartan can change his skin color at will to blend into any environment. Sure, I guess, as long as the environment is blue, I suppose. He's also a master of makeup and disguise. Yes, thank you for repeating what it says on the top of the card. And he's also a ventriloquist. Okay, I know that really means he can change his voice to sound like somebody else, but now I'll always imagine him trying to infiltrate G.I.Joe, carrying a dummy and putting on an act. He also speaks over 20 languages, and is an acrobatic/contortionist.
Okay, at this point he's a one-man circus.
Well, minus the clowns. He won't look like that until version 2. Very little is known of his background, there's that famous military intelligence again, but various agencies strongly suspect he's at European military training.
I can assure you that few, if any, European militaries use ventriloquism as one of their training methods.
The card speculates he was trained in Saint-Cyr. This refers to the École Spéciale Militaire de Saint-Cyr, the top French military academy, not to be confused with Sancerre, a rather nice type of French wine. I don't know why they think Zartan trained there. I mean, he's not on the list of alumni on their Wikipedia page.
Feel free to correct that little oversight if any of you are bored enough and see how long it lasts.
And now here's the part that will bite us in the ass later on. The card says he practices several mystic martial arts. Yeah, I bet it was this one sentence, this one small little factoid, that led Hasbro to go, "That means he's a ninja!" when it came to filling out a roster for their Ninja Force toyline.
Which segues nicely into the second file card.
And the first thing I want to point out is that it's a pain in the dick to read. That purple-pink background isn't doing my eyes any favors. The card does go straight into an explanation for the radically different look. By way of his motto. Oh yeah, he's got a motto now. My personality changes as often as my looks. And they're both bad. Well, card, I'm glad we can come together and between the two of us agree that this is a bad look.
I don't think I've ever seen a file card insult the figure itself, so that's a first.
For some reason, the card repeats the first's claim that he can change the color of his skin at will, even though the second figure doesn't use that gimmick. I think it's because this one reuses most of the first card's text, like him being a cunning linguist and the whole circus thing. It does add that captured Cobra documents reveal he's as lethal as a two-headed rattler disguised as a garter snake, and that he changes appearances and personality so much he can't even keep track of them himself.
Yeah, I think that last part is a very sanitized version of the deleted part from the original.
Nowhere on the card does it explain how or why he's a ninja now, though, meaning the repeated phrase that he knows mystical martial arts has to do a lot of heavy lifting here. And that's all we get from the original toy line.
And it was very interesting. But you know what was also very interesting? What was not in these cards?
There's no mention of him being affiliated with the Dreadnoks at all, even though he was their leader in both the comics and the cartoons. In fact, the Dreadnoks wouldn't be mentioned until the Spy Troops file card.
Well, let's move on to 2001 and version 3.
And two things immediately jump out at me. First, that's a lot of text. That's a lot of tiny text. Is this a file card or the first part of Lord of the Rings? Second, there's no art. Well, saves me a toy art talk, I guess. Instead, there's a photo. And it isn't even a photo of the actual damn toy, but of a prototype. And even that is being generous, as it's clearly just an old Zartan head glued onto a ball joint and stuck on the new body.
Anyway, the first remarkable thing in the text is that he now has a birthplace.
It's Nice, France, apparently. Yeah, this is the only file card that ever claims this. Every other one, before or after, keeps his birthplace as unknown. So we could, and in my opinion should, ignore this anomaly.
Besides, I just can't imagine Zartan with a French accent, you know?
The card talks about how he was at that French academy from the first guard, and turned his whole regiment into mercenaries, so he was arrested for treason. But he escaped thanks to his gift for disguises. That's not the reason why this is such a huge wall of text though. No, it's because they tried to cram half his comic character in, saying how he trained as a ninja and uses holograms and other stuff we'll get to when we talk about the comic. In addition to that, it says the same stuff that was in the original card. And then there's the second paragraph.
Yes, the second paragraph is back. It's a little different, but it's no less bullcrap.
Now he's extremely paranoid and has multiple personality disorder.
Oh, for shit's sake. You heard me. Yeah, normally I don't use 4-letter words in my videos, but this deserves it.
The problem with the original wasn't just that it confused two different mental illnesses. It was that they portrayed a violent bad guy as having one. And that still happens here. It's a dangerous stereotype that literally causes harm. In fact, it makes it more likely for the mentally ill to be victims of violence. Yeah, whoever wrote this was an idiot.
Moving on!
The G.I.Joe vs. Cobra cards stick mostly with the info found on the original. The revised one, I mean. But they do add a reason for Zartan being in a 2-pack with Scarlet and Stalker, respectively. He's mad at her because she's the first and only person who's ever seen through his disguise. And then, with the Stalker pack, he was the one who was the first and only one to do that.
So great continuity there!
Most of the other later cards stick with the original too, though sometimes adding he's the leader of the Dreadnoks or that he uses holograms. The exception being the movie Zartan, where they explain he's an actual shapeshifter thanks to Destro's nanomachines, and he's infiltrated G.I.Joe headquarters, and his next impersonation will be the culmination of his devious career.
Yeah, it's all stuff about the movies.
The very last file card, the 50th anniversary one, sticks with the original again, including the bit where his skin can change color. Yeah, several later file cards still include that, even though none of the later figures ever had that gimmick. The card also gives a reason for the 3-pack, namely that Torpedo and Hit and Run are tracking him through the swamp.
And those were the file cards. But before we end, I'm gonna throw out a few more tidbits that I couldn't fit anywhere else in the video.
First of all, he's got the G.I. Joe logo under his portrait on his file card. Now, he's not technically a Cobra, he's a mercenary, so the Cobra symbol shouldn't be there. But he sure as hell shouldn't have been labeled as a G.I. Joe either. I'm thinking that maybe this was an in-joke. Since he's a master of disguise, he could pretend to be a G.I. Joe. Or it was just a screw-up, we may never know. Zartan is the only character in the original line that had family members that were also toys. His brother Xandar and his sister Zarana. Both of those toys also had the color-changing gimmick and as a result the welded torsos. In the modern continuity, he also had a daughter, Zanya. By the way, all these names make me believe Zartan really is his real name.
And his parents had a cruel sense of humor.
Finally, Larry Hama, when given the character, believed Zartan was a low-level mutant, explaining his powers. But since superpowers weren't really a thing in the G.I. Joe comic, this never got used. That's why Hama went with holograms in the end, I think.
Well, that about wraps it up. I want to thank the Omega for all his help with the mental health portions of this video. Next time, we'll be looking at Zartan in the cartoons and comics. I'll see you then, everybody, and hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing.
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Introducing Zartan. Zartan changes color in sunlight.
There's Zartan! He's escaping in the chameleon! Let's go get him! Yo, Joe!
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes.
Hey, welcome to Half the Battle, and welcome back to Main Character May.
Today, we'll be looking at Zartan in the comics, cartoons, and we'll even take a quick look at the live-action movies.
Let's start with the cartoons, shall we?
Zartan first appeared in The Revenge of Cobra, the second G.I. Joe miniseries. In the first 5 minutes of the first episode, Cobra Commander has been captured, and Zartan, along with his Dreadnoks, has been hired to get him out of prison. The very first time we see him, he shows off his camouflage abilities. But this would get dropped from the cartoons pretty quickly. Instead, they'd start focusing more on his disguise abilities. They also show off his chameleon vehicle and his ventriloquism when he captures Colonel Sharp.
To fool my people.
Thank you, Colonel Sharp.
Your voice was the only thing missing.
We also see an attribute of him that's exclusive to the cartoon. When he gets angry, his chest lights up red. And it sounds like a lightsaber.
Get back, you rowdy lot of vagabonds!
And why does it sound like a lightsaber? Because it's literally the sound of a lightsaber. Yeah, get ready for another digression. But this week, it's gonna be fun.
I already mentioned this in a cartoon review once, but there's a reason Zartan's chest has the lightsaber sound effect, and that reason is... Jim Henson and the Muppets.
I sense you may want further explanation.
Okay, so Jim Henson was friends with George Lucas, and when the cartoon series Muppet Babies was being made, Henson asked his buddy if he could do a Star Wars spoof. Lucas not only agreed, but gave him access to Star Wars footage to use and the special effects sound library. So when Sunbow, the studio that made the series, or rather their Korean subcontractor, got hold of all those Star Wars special effect sounds, they quietly added them to their own sound library for use in other projects. And that's why you should really go through old G.I.Joe and Transformers episodes to play Spot the Star Wars.
Okay, digression over.
In The Revenge of Cobra, Zartan does two notable things. He helps the commander escape at the beginning, and at the end he shows his mercenary colors by trying to auction off a valuable piece of equipment to both the Joes and Cobra. He's got one other characteristic that's only in the cartoon. When he's exposed to sunlight, he turns blue, but not to blend in. In fact, it's a bad thing as he reacts almost like he's a vampire.
Oh, sunlight! I hate sunlight.
Though this too gets used less as the series goes on. He appears in the cartoon series quite a lot and stays true to his character, being the disguise guy and only being loyal to the money or gold he gets paid. My favorite disguise of his is in Lights Camera Cobra, where Hollywood is making a G.I. Joe movie, so he just pretends to be the actor playing Zartan.
Look, Buster, I'm not letting some play actor put down my unit and its gear.
It's real Zartan.
It's brilliant, really.
I've joked before about how Zartan infiltrates G.I. Joe headquarters so much he's got his own bunk bed now, but in season 2 of the show, they basically make the same joke.
Only I can gain that access for you.
The Joes have a file on you a mile long. I can sneak in and out before they suspect a thing.
Zartan didn't appear in the Deke series, even though Ninja Force did, so they could have used his version 2 outfit. Still, he had a great run in the Sunbow series.
That brings us to the comic books. Needless to say, Zartan had a huge arc there.
He is first introduced in the very last panel of issue 24, a story that has Cobra Commander escaping G.I. Joe custody, but unlike his cartoon debut, Zartan has little to do with it. He's properly introduced in issue 25, named Zartan. I already reviewed that issue, so I'm not gonna go into it again. I will give you an overview of Zartan's character arc and his more notable feats in the comic book.
Spoiler warning for the entire G.I. Joe comic book series, obviously. And also for my future comic book reviews, now that I think about it.
Going through his comic arc is sort of tricky, since a lot happened to him before the comic even starts, later told in flashbacks. Way before issue 1, he had been hired by the guy who would become Cobra Commander to kill Snake Eyes, but he ends up accidentally killing Storm Shadow's uncle instead.
Yeah, there's a whole interconnected past between everybody important in the G.I. Joe universe and Snake Eyes.
What's important about Zartan's past is that he became an expert bowman and used these skills in his attempt to kill Snake Eyes. His teacher was so ashamed by this he committed ritual suicide. In the regular comic run, he again showed his prowess with a bow by killing Serpentor during the Cobra Civil War, effectively ending the conflict. I think it was this whole archery thing that made Hasbro consider him for Ninja Force, as his card art shows him with a bow, and the figure came with one. A garish neon orange one.
Because, once again, this toy hates me personally.
His next major feat is a confrontation with the Blind Master, another ninja that has connections to Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, because who doesn't at this point? No, seriously, I'm surprised Shipwreck's parrot doesn't have a connection to freaking Snake Eyes. They have a fatal fight, but the blind guy tells him his old master had forgiven him with his dying breath. This revelation has such an impact on him he renounces his evil ways and turns good. By impersonating the guy he just killed and taking on his ward.
Okay, so renouncing evil is very much graded on a curve here.
Later on, he meets up with Billy, Cobra Commander's son, in the guise of the Blind Master and infiltrates Cobra Island. Before they can really do anything, they are discovered by Cobra Commander, who locks them in a freighter, then buries that freighter under a frickin' volcano.
Yes, I know there's a lot more going on in that story, but it doesn't concern Zartan, so I'm not gonna get into it here.
And that's the end of Zartan. For quite a while at least. It's not till a good 15 issues later we find out he and Billy escaped from that prison, though many others died. They end up with Destro, who they team up with since Cobra Commander wants them all dead and has captured the Baroness. They succeed in getting the Commander to back off in the end and get the Baroness back. Something like 20 issues later, they meet up again, with Zartan showing off his new appearance. You can tell Larry Hama was just thrilled with this new design as he transforms back into his old outfit right away. Though he does use his version 2 look more later on.
Also, he's not called a ninja in the comic.
They end up back at Castle Destro, and Zartan hangs out with him and the Baroness at the castle for most of the rest of the series, until Cobra Commander shows up with a retcon and a reset button. He shows them his face, and it turns out Mindbender had implanted a device in their brains years ago that would mind control them if and when that happened, turning them evil again. And Zartan remains that way for the rest of the series.
Yeah, it's a very unsatisfying ending that he shares with the Baroness and others.
Though Larry Hama has stated that he never meant for everybody to remain mind-controlled, but the comic book ended before that story had a chance to be resolved. And that was Zartan in the original comic. Going through his appearances, you can see how they quickly made holograms the main source of his powers instead of innate abilities. The whole color-changing thing doesn't come up after his first few appearances. Like I mentioned last week, in the later modern comics, he found out he had a daughter named Sanya. I don't really read those comics a lot, but I do know they also gave him a skin disease related to his genetic tampering, even though that wasn't a thing in the Marvel comics.
Lastly, as promised, we'll briefly go over the live-action movies.
In the first movie, The Rise of Cobra, he does two things. He infiltrates the pit, killing CoverGirl in the process, the asshole, and later is injected with nanomachines to turn him into a true shapeshifter. At the very end of the movie, he replaces the President of the United States, setting up the sequel. So, in Rise of Cobra, he was played by Arnold Vosloo, of the Mummy fame, while in the sequel, Retaliation, he was played by Jonathan Pryce of Game of Thrones fame, since he was now impersonating the President.
I know it was always planned like that, but damn, that is one hell of an excuse for a recasting.
In that movie, he uses his powers to basically kill off the G.I.Joe team and works towards world domination. He ends up getting killed by Storm Shadow. And that was Zartan, a very intriguing character in both the cartoon and comic.
And that does it for Zartan overall.
The only real misstep, I can even forgive the Ninja Force figure, was that second paragraph on the first file card, but we've already discussed that at length. Oh, so much length. There's also one thing that didn't occur to me until after I'd done the action figures episode. Why didn't they remake Ninja Force Zartan as a Shadow Ninja? Their whole gimmick was that they turn invisible. It would have fit perfectly with the character. Well, that about wraps it up, but we're not quite done. You may have noticed I didn't mention a cartoon episode, one that has his name in it. So next week, we'll be taking a look at Countdown for Zartan to round off main character May.
Yes, I know that this year May has 5 Tuesdays in it, but I think we're pretty much done here, and I need a break anyway. Well, I'll see you next time, everybody. And hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing?
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Introducing Zartan. Zartan changes color in sunlight.
There's Zartan! He's escaping in the chameleon! Let's go get him! G.I.Joe!
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Hey, welcome to Half the Battle. We're closing main character May with a nice relaxing list, because it's been a lot of work for me this month.
So I'll be giving you my top 5 Zartan moments.
Now I know what you're thinking. Timmer, you dapper doofus, it's June already.
And, well, yes, I can't argue with the concept of time. I can only say I made a mistake when I thought there were 5 Tuesdays in May. Turns out I was looking at an old calendar from 2018. But hey, Patreons got this video on Sunday, so technically, it was released in May.
So I'm in the clear. I can do no wrong. Now let's never discuss it again.
Back to the list. I actually asked my Twitter followers for their favorite moments, expecting various scenes from the cartoons or comics, and sure, that was in there.
But I got back some things that were quite unexpected too. And that's what inspired the first thing I'll talk about.
Number 5. The moments you made yourself. Originally, I was gonna put the actual release of the first toy here, but I changed my mind when I got that Twitter feedback. Some people mentioned the first time they got the toy and took it out to play with it. Others sent in dioramas they made. So the best moments are the memories we have and the stuff we made happen ourselves.
Aw, now that we're all feeling warm and fuzzy inside, let me piss you off with the next entry.
Number 4. Impersonating the President. Say what you will about the live-action movies, and I sure have, but ending the first on the cliffhanger that Zartan was now the President of the United States, and Retaliation dealing with the consequences of that, was one of the best things about the movies. Plus, it helped that both actors put in good performances. I'd also argue that this was Cobra's most successful plot in any media.
And it was all thanks to Zartan.
Number 3. Disguising himself as himself. I mentioned this in the cartoon character video, and I've reviewed the episode itself some time ago, but when Zartan infiltrated a movie set in Light's camera Cobra, disguised as the actor playing him, so without a disguise at all, and Joe's not realizing despite all other actors being quite different from the real thing, well, that was just hilarious and one of Zartan's greatest tricks.
It's real Zartan.
Number 2. Cold Slither.
Just Cold Slither, the entire freaking episode.
Yeah, I don't really want to get into it here, since I will one day review the episode, but come on! Cobra starts a rock band and Zartan is the singer!
And that's freaking awesome!
And the number 1 Zartan moment is... killing Serpentor.
Okay, so some of you may be a little disappointed that this is the only comic moment on the list, but it is an humdinger and it deserves the number 1 spot to boot.
This happens during my favorite story arc from the comics, the Cobra Civil War, where 4 factions, G.I.Joe, Destro, Cobra, and, Cobra, are at each other's throats, with some alliances thrown in. The arc featured basically every Joe and Cobra character created up to that point, plus hundreds of troops. It was a massive war!
And Zartan ended it all with 1 arrow!
Oh yeah, 1 impossible shot decided the whole Civil War. And it's even more impressive since Zartan snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, as Serpentor was about to win the whole thing. For all those reasons, this is my number 1 Zartan moment.
If you have your own favorites that I didn't mention, feel free to let me know in the comment section below.
And that was the list, short and sweet. Yeah, doing main character May was tons of fun, but man was it a lot of work. Which I've had less time for when my regular job started up again when the store lockdowns ended here. So consider this a small delicious piece of dessert.
Well, I'll see you next time, everybody. And hey, why not like, share, and subscribe if that's your thing.
He's an evil master of disguise. Zartan changes color right before your eyes. Zartan.
Introducing Zartan. Zartan changes color in sunlight.
There's Zartan!